Thank you very much for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan from the Rocks and Stocks News website. And I've got a special guest today in Joe Ovsenek. He was formerly involved with a company that many of my viewers probably remember, which is Pretium. Pretium recently has been in a takeover. We're a phenomenal pick. I picked it originally at around $3. Their new company is called P2 Gold, and I'm hoping they've got a Pretium 2. Joe, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning, Allan.
So why don't we get right into it, Joe, and make the case why this might be a Pretium 2.0 story. You had some news out today, and the headline from that news was drilling at Gabs intersects 1.01 grams per ton gold equivalent over 153 meters and expands the Sullivan zone to the southeast. So, when it comes to these open pit heap leachable type targets, that's a very good grade these days. I remember when under a gram or better was what you looked at, and now it's even down to a half a gram. So it looks like you guys are onto something there.
Yeah, no, look, we're excited about Gabs. We picked the property up in May of this year, and because of that, we looked at the data, and when we first saw the property, we've been looking for since we launched a little stepping back a bit. We launched P2 back in May of 2020. Picked up some grassroots properties. We were looking for a property with some resources a little more advanced, so we fill up the pipeline, kick tires on about half a dozen plus properties. Either they had warts or the price was astronomical because gold was up. So as we got into this year, people got a little more realistic on pricing. We looked at Gabs. What got us excited about it initially was, geez, it's got a paved highway through the corner of the property, a gravel road through it, a power line. And, after working up in northern BC for 10 plus years, it's nice to be able to drive to something and not have to spend a lot of money on helicopters in the early days. So that got our interest. And then we dug into it and we saw, hell, everybody was focused on the oxide gold. No one paid attention to the copper. Things have come a long way since the, late 80s, early 90s on recovery of gold and copper and the oxides. So that, we started looking at that. And then once we looked at the data, we thought, hell, this thing, right now it's, we've got 1.84 million ounces gold equivalent. We think we can double or triple that resource just by redrilling the existing zones. The historical drilling, a lot of times they just focused on the gold, ignored the copper. They drilled shallow holes, focused on the oxide, and they were percussion drilling vertical holes. And it looks to us like the gold's in these subvertical structures. So with drilling these vertical holes, they were missing a lot of the grade. So we've noticed it with our holes. When we drill an angle hole versus a vertical hole, we're getting better grade. So there's just so much potential here. We think Gabs, just in there's 4 known zones of mineralization. Our target is 4 to 5 million ounces gold equivalent. So that's a nice size project. We also have some potential.
Now, before you get into more, Joe, when you look at that kind of a target, I saw in the resource that it was about a 50-50 split between the oxide and the sulfides.
Right.
How do you think that will break out when you talk about that kind of a target?
Well, our view is, I think we're going to end up with more sulfides down the road. The nice thing about the way it's, and we've got a high grade, pretty much oxide zone near surface. So we're targeting a PEA for the end of 2022. So I think the way we look at it is we focus on that oxide, get things going, focus on that high grade, get into it. That generates the cash and that pays to build the mill to treat the sulfides.
Well, you might not need to build one there.
I think as we...
My friend at I-80 Gold, Ewan Downey, they're a sponsor of my website, actually. I've known Ewan for
years.
and he might come knocking on your door because they can process sulfide material on the new mill they bought.
Yeah, they're I'm sure they're going to look for some feed, right? Well, after they get through processing all their own. So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So there was a quote in your news release that I wanted to mention. Just let me bring it up here. And it's from you, and Joe states, and I quote, "We have the assays for all of the Sullivan Zone drill holes from the phase 1 program, and the results confirm our thesis that the historical drilling understated the width and grade of the copper gold mineralization at Gabs. This phase 1 program has also confirmed that the Sullivan Zone measures at least 1,000 meters long and 200 meters wide and hosts near surface high grade gold copper mineralization. The preparation of an updated mineral resource estimate is underway and expected to be completed in the first quarter of 2022. RC samples from the remaining 3 holes from the Carbody zone and 1 hole from the Lucky Strike zone are in the lab, and we expect to release those results early in the new year." End quote. So there's a couple things there that stood out to me, Joe. One is that why do you think that it understated? Is it because they didn't assay for copper?
Part of it, partly assaying for copper, partly not drilling right through the zone. And I think a chunk of it is, late 80s, early 90s, a lot of percussion drilling. And they just, all vertical holes with a percussion drilled. I don't think they got good recoveries on the gold. And I think they missed the subvertical shears, that shear zone that we're drilling through. So they when they were in the gold, they got the gold. But if they were, next to it, we saw this at Bruce Jack. If you drill through the stock work and you hit the gold, great. But if you drill through the stock work and you miss it by an inch, you miss it. So by drilling angle holes, we get a more representative sample of the stock work. And I think that's going to lift a fair bit as well. So there's a number of factors, but the more we looked at the data, the more we thought, yeah, this thing's bigger than what people are thinking.
Well, it's pretty big, with 1,000 meters by 200 meters by, what's the thickness? It's a couple 100 meters, I think. Joe?
Yeah, it parts. It's a nice size zone. Right now, from memory, we're about 900,000 ounces gold equivalent on Sullivan alone. And, we think we can, Sullivan's probably good for another 50% over time, 50% or more in size. It's a nice zone. And there's some extensions of it where we believe it's been faulted off and shifted a bit. So that adds potential there as well. So look at it. We're pretty pumped on Gabs.
Well, I don't really blame you, Joe. I'm just going to, I saw, when I was preparing this for this show, I went through your corporate presentation, and one of my mentors in geology always told me to look at the distribution of the gold in the drill hole. And at Gab's project, there's one section there looking northwest, and the distribution of the gold is very consistent throughout the hole. I guess that's probably what got you guys kind of excited.
Yeah, like nice numbers, and you drill through. There's a monzonite, and when you're through the monzonite, it's very consistent. Nice gold grades, nice copper grades, and so it's going to be a nice deposit. I think it's going to turn into a nice mine. Okay,
so in addition, a couple of weeks ago, you were at the Metals Investors Forum, and I saw your presentation. And also the interview that you and Ken McNaughton did with my friend John Kaiser.
Yeah.
And you also talked about the BAM zone, and getting back to that continuity question in a drill hole. I noticed a couple things on the cross section from the BAM drilling. There's good distribution throughout the hole. But I saw that there was kind of a spike at the contact, at the bottom of the hole and at the top of the hole. What can you tell us about BAM?
Well, with BAM, look, as we like to say, it's the newest gold discovery in the triangle. We think it's got multi-million ounce potential. Yeah, we're seeing the gold. You know, we feel we've got a porphyry down at depth. Well, stepping back, I think the reason BAM is sitting there and no one's come across it yet is that there's some basalt flows through the center of the valley, and they cover the contact. They're about 10, 20 meters thick, so they're not thick, but they cover the contact between the really old granites and where we see the porphyry coming up, and we have the conglomerates and that. And so we feel the mineralizations come up and float in where you know, the area that's most receptive. And so we're seeing it at the contacts on the conglomerate or the siltstones and that. So we've got a nice, in that hole 3, we had a nice intersection, 9 meters of 7.3 grams per ton gold within the broader, you know, 2.63 grams per ton over 45 meters. So,
and that was at the contact.
Exactly. And, you know, that's a nice mineable width and grade for an underground operation, right? So, and that's from surface pretty much.
Secondly, it gives you a package of rocks there to follow.
Yeah. And we just drill, like, we'll be back in there. Right now we're planning, well, if you heard our interview, we're planning 8,000 to 10,000 meters of drilling at BAM this coming summer. And yeah, one of the things we'll be doing is we'll be just stepping back and following that hole down and drilling back. It's an epithermal deposit, and we feel we can just, you know, get into something big down below it.
Well, it looks like you're already on the top of the boiling zone there.
Yeah, not far from it, right?
And another thing I noticed is that it looks like you've got a parallel argillite and siltstone package on the other side of the carbonates that you didn't reach, and you're starting to get some grade even in the carbonates.
Yeah, and we had a really nice surface samples right up on the top, just the other side of the carbonates. And so, yeah, that we definitely have to push that hole because it looks like the grade's running right across. And so, but you know, the thing, it's all dipping to the east. And so we just have to step back and follow that down. And who knows? So we've got, you know, as I say, at surface, we think there's that multi-million ounce potential. And then it's just a question of where at depth is the porphyry that's feeding this. And so we've got some deep looking geophysics lined up airborne.
Before you even chase for the porphyry, you've got the potential to find a cluster of veins, epithermal veins, in the right window of the boiling zone.
Oh, look, absolutely. That's what has us excited, because as I say, just at surface, there's multi-million ounce potential. And then there's the whole shooting match at depth. So yeah, so, you know, we'll go back and we're going to drill off at surface. All goes well, we'll come up with a resource, you know, next end of 22, early 23 for our initial maiden resource for BAM. And we'll, you know, if all, you know, we're doing this deep penetrating geophysics, and if all goes well, maybe we'll take a couple of shots at that, put a couple holes toward there, just as you know, wild card.
So with those angled holes, are you planning to extend and try to get through the carbonates onto the other side where there might be some more preferential rock for other veins?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll either try to get back in that hole and extend that, or come in, step back and drill below it and continue across. But we can also collar up in the carbonates and, you know, do a shallower hole and drill across as well.
Oh, right. So, yeah. So
you know, just to follow it, right? So we've got a few things going for us. It's I tell you, it's a nice property to work on because we're not really up on a peak. It's a nice broad plateau, so you really have room to, you know, set your pads aren't hanging off cliffs, right? It's a nice place. I tell you, it's a great place to work up. For the triangle, it can't be Gabs because it's like flat and, well, near flat and roads. But I tell you, at BAM, it's, you know, we've got a road not far away, a power line not far away, and it's a nice plateau that, you know, probably what, 5-6 kilometers long by a couple kilometers wide. So it's a nice size area to work.
Well, and you've got potential for size there because those epithermal veins tend to run about 1,000 meters or more long. And they go down towards the porphyry, and you've got,
Yeah.
a good, looks like you're just on the top of the boiling zone.
Yeah, because we're getting good grade right on surface. So, yeah, no, exciting times, right? With it, it's really fortunate to have two, not just one, but two projects that have some a lot of excitement to them.
Well, and they kind of complement each other in that when you can't work in the Golden Triangle, you can certainly work in Nevada.
Oh, isn't that the truth, right? Otherwise, when you're early stage up in the triangle, before you get a permanent camp in and a road, you're limited to 4 months, 5 months maybe. But yeah, this is great. We can work, keep our geos busy up north in the summer, and then the rest of the season they're down at Gabs.
So that sounds very exciting. I'm down here in Mexico where there's clusters of epithermal veins all over the place and big silver mines all over the place.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of knowledgeable about these epithermal vein systems. And, another nice thing, if you're at the top of the system, you're not going to need a lot of really deep holes to get down and cover the entire boiling zone.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep stepping back and drilling under deeper and deeper down below it, and chase it downwards. A little bit like that's how they discovered the Los Gatos in Mexico. Talking with Bud and Perry, they got a little sniff up. They just stepped back, drilled a little lower, and the grade kept increasing. So.
Another exciting thing about these epithermal vein clusters is that a lot of times the vein won't come to surface. About 20 miles from where I live is the Milagros mine, and two of the veins came to surface, and they mined those off, and then they were cross-cutting to connect them, and they came across a blind vein that in today's dollars would be worth around 350 grand per ton. So there's in these epithermal vein systems, there's a potential to find blind veins. In fact, Juanicipio that Mag Silver is now putting into production is a blind vein as well.
Yeah, and what a vein as well. Boy, yeah.
There you go. Those epithermal veins, in that case, it's silver, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of ounces of silver and very high margin silver.
You can't beat them for grade. It's yeah. So yeah, as I say, yeah, BAM. We'll see how it goes, but we've got high hopes for BAM. Absolutely.
Well, and the granddaddy of them all, I guess, is Hishikari, and I'm always keeping my fingers crossed that somebody finds another Hishikari.
Could you imagine that, boy? Yeesh.
Well, you're in the right kind of rocks. You're in the right. You got the fluids flowing. They got gold in them. You've got the right kind of veins. It's certainly not out of the picture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd settle for another Bruce Jack size deposit, or grade deposit, but something to dream about.
Well, if you find something the size of a Juanicipio and it's full of gold, I think you'll make a lot of people happy, including yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely.
So, without getting too geology with people, the porphyry is what brings the fluids up from deeper, and then they keep going in a continuum that you'll get these epithermal vein systems. So there's two targets: the cluster of epithermal veins and the deeper porphyry. And while we're talking about porphyries, let's go back to Gabs for a minute. At Gabs, you talk about sill-like bodies. And is that the same kind of idea that these sills are the extension of a porphyry, and that you still have to target that porphyry deeper?
Correct. So we've just finished up a natural source MT study, and survey, and we're going to go back and try to get a few infill lines. We've identified some targets, and so just to refine those a bit better. And then, yeah, there's a, well, we know it's porphyry mineralization, so it had to come from a porphyry. So, you know, it's and it can't be that deep because, you know, we're seeing the actual porphyry mineralization at surface. So, yeah, so potential there for it.
Hell of a combination there, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a nice solid resource at surface, and see what we've got just sitting not too far down below.
And keep chasing that that sulfide material towards the porphyry.
Correct. That's exactly the plan. You got it.
I learned a couple things over the years, Joe.
Yeah. But well, you don't have as much gray hair as me, but you got a bit.
Getting there. You know, Joe, I before we close, I want to go back to your Pretium days. I followed it for many years. I mentioned it many times in my reports. I used to be on BNN quite a bit and mentioned it on there as well. And it's been a fantastic pick for me now that it's a takeover. And even before that, you know, finding an exploration project that then turns into a high-grade, high-margin mine is always one of the feathers in the quiver. But you guys, it looks like you're in the midst of trying to build another Pretium.
Yeah, well, we've got something to prove here, and so we're looking to make it happen.
And taking it back to Pretium, you guys had things to prove there. You guys got hammered a lot on the resource. In fact, I don't want to name him, but there was a famous analyst out there that hammered it on BNN, which is exactly the opportunity that I took to jump on board, because the way I looked at it, I thought Robert Quartermain knew a hell of a lot more about finding and building mines than the analyst did. And I stuck with it mainly because of that. Well, first, because of the tremendous high grade, but secondly,
hard to beat that grade.
Of Robert Quartermain.
Yeah, no, it's incredible what some of the stuff getting dished out on us through those days. So it's nice to see Pretium perform and then get taken out. I think it would have been a great cash flow producer on its own, but that's just the market.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the market? It's a pretty good sign for the supply chain of gold. And I mean, there's tons of arguments of why demand should stay strong. You've got, the money printing is out of control. They've printed 40% of the dollars ever produced in the history of the United States in the last year. The debt has gone just parabolic. You're now running trillion-dollar deficits on an annual basis. The overall debt in the United States is now over $30 trillion. Federal Reserve is painted into a corner. They have to keep interest rates low. They can't fight inflation because if they just went back up to the norm, you would decimate any economic growth. So this environment on the monetary side is very strong argument for gold. And then you've got the supply story. It's no wonder that these majors are buying other producers because they're not having any success with the truth machine. They're not able to find and build new mines. So they got to go out there and buy existing mines. So what are your thoughts on gold going forward? Because that can be a great catalyst for a company such as yours.
I agree with you on all the points you raised. It's an environment where gold's going to perform, fixed assets are going to perform, and so gold is going to shine. And the nice thing, both our projects are gold copper, and we think copper's got a fairly rosy future over the next while they start pushing this electrification. So between printing money and converting everything to electricity, I think gold, copper are going to be places to be.
Well, that copper is a hell of a kicker because not only are they going to change the transportation industry into electric, but what is lost on a lot of people when it comes to copper is the aging infrastructure of the power grid in the United States and other countries. If they want to meet those, just the copper alone for the vehicles is one issue, but they've also got this issue of an aging infrastructure. And that will overwhelm the supply if they got to start upgrading their power grids.
Yeah, you don't hear anybody talking about it, but all they talk about is we're going to electrify all these cars by 2030. Well, you're not doing that without a lot of copper and a lot more copper than we're currently producing. So it's copper's not going down.
Yeah, because you're using a few hundred pounds or more of copper in every electronic vehicle, and then if you start to electrify the trucks and the buses and everything else, you're talking about a ton of that stuff in buses and trucks.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, well, even like, so you go to alternate, so you put in a wind turbine or something else, you'll still need to get the electricity from that turbine to the end user and
the charger.
And you're using copper and a lot of it.
And I really think it's lost on a lot of people that the industrialized nations of, the United States and Europe, they're dealing with really ancient power grids.
Yeah.
They need to upgrade those. And that alone would just overwhelm the supply of copper.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I think we're looking out the decade ahead of us. Gold and copper are going to be strong through the decade and great places to be. And I think we're in the right place at the right time here at P2.
You sure are, Joe. Well, you've been very kind with your time, and I'm going to close it off next. But before I do, was there anything I forgot to ask you that you want to present to my audience?
Well, no, I think you hit all the high points here. It's for us, it's pushing ahead with GABs, get towards the PEA and bring along BAM to a resource estimates. So just exciting times for us.
Sounds like a heck of a news flow coming up, Joe.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year 2022. So stay tuned.
Okay, let me close it off and then we'll have a chat at the end.
Sounds good.
All right. So there you go, folks. They've got a heck of a combination with their projects in the Golden Triangle as well as down in Nevada. I can see, one of the things that I always look for is continuity of grade. And if you go to their website and you look at their corporate presentation, you're going to see that in both the projects. They got the copper kicker. And, when I was preparing for this show, I did a little look at their stock chart because I like to look at stock charts. And they're one of only a couple of the gold companies that I follow that have gone through one of the most bullish indicators that I look for in a stock chart. That's the Golden Cross. A lot of them are still bottoming, and it looks like they'll have golden crosses in the not too distant future. But P2 Gold has just a couple of weeks ago, they passed that golden cross, and that's a very bullish sign. And so then you want to look at the catalysts and the news flow, and they look to have a year's worth of news flow ahead of them. They just put out some very good results, and they still have a modest valuation. And these guys have done it before. They've done it with Pretium. Ken McNaughton and Joe were very instrumental in the finding and the building of that mine. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it could be even a fraction of the success Pretium has been for me as a pick and my audience that became shareholders. And we're in early on this one, and I think I'm going to be able to bang the drum on P2 Gold for a long time. So stay tuned. We're going to have more of these interviews with Joe in the future. I can feel it. There you go, Joe.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks a lot, Al. Much appreciated. Thank you.